thank you for joining our latest Wellington community event. We appreciate you taking the time. As always with our webinars, they're recorded, designed to be short and sweet, so you get the most out of them. Today, we have Didenchuk from Lloyds Banking Group talking to us about the risk that comes with over-engineering our processes, something that we see at Wellington all the time, especially working within technology and project management and PMO, and we actively try to dissuade people from. So Victor, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. That was a really sweet summary, and I hope we can expand this topic a little bit more today. So, optimizations. What do you think when you hear this word? So something is getting better, probably more effective, and pretty much helps to extract more value from what we do or what our team does. But what happens when we focus more on optimization than the final cause? I think this is exactly the point where we kind of end up in a sort of a pitfall. So let's try to explore this topic, see it some examples, and perhaps try to understand how we can tackle this situation. So we try to optimize everywhere. Think about your workplace. You have Jira. It's a really great tool that helps us to manage our tasks. We have some sort of checklist, such as definition of done. Again, we've optimized our time, our commitment, and our focus on specific items that are required to deliver the value. If you're really deep into programming, you probably have some sort of branching strategy in your organization where specific people are able to commit, specific people are required to approve, or you are required to work in different branches just to make sure you do not interact with the code unless it is delivered. So there are many other examples that we can think about, but do they actually help? Do we even remember the original idea behind the majority of these items? So if you look on the list and think about the idea, they are all were introduced for a purpose. Let's take a look on more closer example. So I think Jira is a standard now. If you go on the London Tube, you have advertisement for Monday.com. I've never seen that used, but so I believe Jira is still the most popular thing everywhere. So I've picked this example just to make it really close for everyone. If you worked in any kind of software development organization, you've seen this many, many times. So it's a Jira workflow. It has probably dozen or more statuses. It's a net of transitions between statuses. There are hidden rules, not only those that are on the screen, but also, for example, you can't move if the ticket has a specific field set, or you can't move if the reporter is not set, or something else that you've implemented at a specific point in time. There are some automation rules and many, many other constraints that are there. When we've created all of these items, they were created to make someone's life easier. So we've created more statuses just to make the visibility even better, so we can understand what's going on with the work item. When we've created a rule between transition, that was just to make sure that everyone is all the process is being followed. But think about it deeper. After some time, most of these items actually doesn't make sense. So imagine there is someone who is joining, and this is actually a really good example of a fresh perspective that can help us spot these points. So when they join, they will ask really valid questions. Why we do X? Why can't I move item to column Y? We don't use this status anyway, and this is a really common example. I bet pretty much everyone who is listening can now think about such scenario that something just exists there, but no one uses it, and everyone just skips it because, you know, we don't use it anyway. And no one really remember why this field was created, or there is no guideline how to use this field, so we just put not assigned there. So valid questions, right? And if we think about them, it looks like we've implemented optimization that don't really help us. So let's take a look on the workflow again. If you look detailed on this, and this is obviously a common example, and you can explore your workflow for the similar pitfalls. But for example, on this one, there might be following items that are not valid anymore. For example, team no longer needs text specification. And obviously, I've just come up with this one, but you can try to explain why. Some statuses are obsolete and not used. For example, we don't really need any ready for QA anymore because we just don't do manual testing anymore and it's done automatically. So why we still have this status? All in general is just super, super complex. If someone new joins or someone who joins from the different team, they don't really understand what's going on here. There are 16 statuses, over 30 transitions, and some hidden rules and exceptions. So this workflow are perfect example of local optimizations. Every and each item on this picture were created for a reason. They probably provide the value and maybe even solved a specific business case when they were introduced. However, not anymore. They are just irritating everyone and are good examples of pitfalls. No one really knows why we are following them. And I think it's a good one to take a look on a different perspective and talk about some sort of a checklist that all organizations have. I work in software, so the example that is most closest to me is definition of done, but you can take into account pretty much any items that you've seen in your life. So how we start with definition of done? There are some basic items that are just common sense, that we need to meet all the acceptance criteria, that we need to review the code, we need to complete the testing, and we need to integrate the code. But as we go further, we can actually see that errors are there. For example, we've integrated the code, we released to the customer, but there is an error. So we come back and we add some additional items. So in this case, the items that are in bold on this slide. For example, we've realized that the customers are just not able to log in after release. So what we do, we just go back and we add additional items to definition of done that are specific for the current problem. So we add additional checklist items. So database migrations are applied, make sure sessions are deleted. Again, sorry for technical examples, but I think this is just really a good idea of these are so specific. If you think about both of these items, they're really valid probably for 10% of the cases. But we still added them into a checklist that is used in 90% of the work that we are doing. So this is another example. The problem here is the checklist is fine. It's absolutely perfect. And we really can use it for our advancement. It also solved the specific case in the previous life. But what happens next? As we've talked about the Jira, when new people join, they will just start asking, why are we doing this? Do we really need this? Or some items just become absolute and they're never revised. So let's take a look from the higher perspective. There are obviously some pros. We can streamline processes, such as in the case of Jira workflow, for example, you can even guide the user or the engineer how to go through the process. We can boost productivity. For example, again, with some automation in Jira, you can eliminate people, you can help people filling the fields. You can make the life easier. No one can argue that Jira doesn't make life easier. It can improve communication and accountability. For example, with definition of done checklist, it's really a good booster for accountability because, you know, it's super easy to go back then to the list and say, you haven't done this, why you haven't done this, and have this sort of a discussion in a feedback manner. It helps us to make sure that we are not missing crucial part of the processes. Both of our examples are excellent for this case. Jira helps us to understand what step goes next, and definition of done obviously helps us to make sure that we are not following the problems. And need governance. So I've used only two examples, but I'm sure in any organization there are many controls and risk acceptances just to make sure that the regulator is happy. quite many positive sides. However, the one negative side that is really, really important here, it's a distraction from what truly matters. The problem here is most of optimizations are left unattended after they are created. We don't really understand why they've been created anymore. Let's say after 6 months, no one will remember why you've done this. We don't really remember who have done this. And also, we don't really know what exactly the benefit of this optimization that we've introduced. However, when we speak about any optimization, any transformation, and any framework that we are doing in an organization, we really have to focus on what is matter. So we ended up in a situation when we've done the good deed, we really introduced many, many good items that solved particular cases. However, when we speak about the value creation, we are actually just distracted from what truly matters. So what I propose here is, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of some pitfalls, some optimizations that don't end up as a pitfall. For example, you really understand the team is immature and you really just need to guide them through some specific statuses or some specific checklists. However, if we go further, it is really important for us to evaluate any items that we've created. So I think the good one is just to start with a couple of questions. Why are we doing this? For example, someone has joined and they're asking a valid question like why this status is here. And if you can't really answer this question, then probably it's time to move on or time to revisit what you've just implemented. If you even have an example why we introduced this, it's important to again come back to the value that we are creating. Does it actually help us? And in what way? If it doesn't, again, it's pretty easy for you just to go revisit and see how we can change this. And is there any other way to solve this problem? Because again, it's absolutely natural from the organization perspective to start creating this kind of boundaries and frameworks and all the risk guilds and whatever you can call them in your organization. But is there any other way to solve this problem? At the end, it's still very, very about the culture in the company, about the values, and maybe you just need to have a chat, or really this is a question of the team maturity. These are just some examples and potential ideas that you want to explore in the team. But again, if you really create them, just don't forget to revisit them. And when you revisit them, ask for questions on the slide. Obviously, this is my view, and you're free to introduce your questions. But the key point here is just don't let them unattended. Make sure that you revisit and understand what has changed there. So, for example, set up a checklist to come back to this point in 6 months. Put a calendar reminder, send a delayed email or something. For example, we've added this status in 6 months. Let's take a look. Do we actually need it still? And the question that I propose to ask yourself is why we've introduced it and what has changed? Did we solve the problem at all? Because most of the optimizations, they solve the problem at some point, but probably the problem has evolved and it's just not valid anymore. Do we still need it? And how do we move forward? Maybe this specific optimization was one of those that are super, super comfortable and we just can tweak it a little bit so we extract even more value from it. So my key point here is really, let's make sure that any optimization that we introduce, we don't let it unattended. Even if it provided value in the past, we come back at some point and make sure that we really understand what is the value it provides. If it doesn't, feel free to use these questions to make sure that you understand what was the point. And if you actually understand the value, try to iterate and implement something new that will perhaps solve your current challenges in a better way. Thank you. I hope this perspective was valuable. I believe any organization in any part of the world has experienced this kind of problem at some point. And of course, every team are able to solve them. You just need to ask questions.
Perfect, Victor. Thank you so much. Super interesting insights, and a really just a simple way, which is what this is all about, of being able to see the problem, I guess. And it is a problem. We do see it a lot in PMOs where, you know, when we're trying to instill more discipline, the natural order of things is to add a process or add a checklist or add some more governance. So it is a very common thing. Well, that's all the time that we have today. So I want to say thank you, Victor, for your insights. It looks like you've made people think, which is great. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today and for your engagement. Remember that we will send you an email following up from this. So keep an eye out for that, which will include your PMI PDU code, for which you can log 1 hour CPD. The video from the session, minus the Q&A, and the companion article for this webinar. We hope to see you at one of our upcoming events very soon. And thank you again, Victor, for your time and your knowledge. It's been very, very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, everyone. Have a good day.